Welcome to Family Business World. I'm your host, Dr. Dale Caldwell, and I have my guest, Mike Beneduce from Beneduce Vineyards. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. How are you?
Good. I was really looking forward to talking to you, especially now during this pandemic where everybody's stuck inside, and I love your background. I love the fact that you're outside. But let me learn a little bit about you. Where did you grow up, and how did you get into the family business?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. This is awesome. I also appreciate being outside. That's certainly one of the nice parts about this business. We weren't locked down in the same sense that a lot of people were. I'm 31. I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in Gillette in Morris County. My parents had a family garden center that my dad started when he was 19 called Great Swamp Greenhouses. And that's still there, and that's run by my parents, and two of my siblings are running that as well. So grew up there, Italian background, and so we always made sort of homemade wine, a barrel or two a year in the basement, and I loved that. We ended up purchasing the farm where I am now, which is in Hunterdon County in Pittstown. It's a 50-acre farm, and we purchased this back in 2000, really for the garden center business. So we put up a few greenhouses here that we use as production greenhouses. We grow ornamental plants here, ship them to the garden center for sale. And meanwhile, we really had, we were only using a few acres on this farm for that. And as I mentioned, it's a large farm. So as all the kids started to kind of go into the high school range, we started to look at what other crops we could plant here. It turns out this ended up being great land for grapes. And so when we had the opportunity to grow our own grapes, it was kind of a cool thing for us because we had always made wine. So I volunteered to learn how to do that and went up to Cornell in the Finger Lakes and did a Bachelor of Science program there that was called Viticulture and Enology, which is basically grape growing and winemaking. So that was a four-year program up there, really hands-on. Cornell has a student vineyard and a student winery.
Wow.
So I really learned, I think, sort of the foundation of this industry there. Worked at a vineyard while I was up there. And then during college, started planting the vineyard here. And when I finished college in 2010, we renovated an existing barn that we have here, which is what I'm sitting under part of, to build out the winery. So we had to insulate it and furnish it and everything.
Wow.
So that's basically how we ended up here.
That's amazing. That really is an amazing story. I mean, I have to say I admire. I went to another Ivy League. I went to Princeton undergrad, and
Right.
I've always admired Cornell. They've always had the best food. When it comes to food, no other Ivy compares to Cornell. So it's a great place.
One of the reasons I ended up there was that their cafeteria food during my visit was amazing. I think I could get this here.
I actually ended up running the cafeteria at Princeton. I had 400 people reporting to me, and the food wasn't that good, but the service was. So this is so now the obvious question is, and we have people watching this around the world. Vineyards, New Jersey. How do you do that? Is New Jersey the right kind of climate for that? Tell us about that.
It is. I really think there's sort of this misconception that California is the only place you can grow grapes in the United States, and certainly they grow the bulk of them by volume. But if you look back pre-Prohibition, New Jersey and New York and a lot of these East Coast states were some of the main wine suppliers in the country.
Oh, really?
It was only Prohibition that all those wineries shut down. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, I think a combination of legal and political things, they just had a much harder time getting restarted than the California wineries. But if you look at, latitude-wise, if you follow New Jersey, New York, Virginia, right across into Europe, we are in the exact same latitude as the main wine-growing regions in Europe, places like France, Italy, Germany. And so, we really have a more similar climate to most of the classic European wine-growing regions than a place like California does, which tends to be very hot and dry and requires irrigation. Our vineyards here are what's called dry farmed, meaning we don't use any irrigation. And that's one of the requirements of most vineyards in Europe, that they are not allowed to irrigate their vineyards, because the philosophy is if you're irrigating your vineyard, you're putting water on the surface of the soil, and you're sort of teaching those roots to grow up for the water. So you get a very shallow rooted plant, which can be an issue for a lot of reasons. But if you're dry farming, like we're doing, you're basically forcing those roots to go deep into the earth to find their own water source. And so you get a much hardier, drought-tolerant, disease-resistant plant. And the Europeans have been doing this for 2,000 years, and they realize that. And so that's one of the reasons why New Jersey is actually a great place for growing grapes. I think some of the earlier failures that happened in younger wineries had to do with variety selection. So grapes have different varieties, just like in apples you have, a McIntosh and a Fuji and a Granny Smith. Grapes have Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Cabernet. Those are different varieties of wine grapes. And, people come at wine industry from all different angles. Maybe they're a wealthy lawyer that wants a trophy vineyard or a retirement project or whatever. And so I think a lot of times people sort of just pick the variety that they like to drink. Right. Maybe they're a Cabernet drinker. But if you plant Cabernet Sauvignon in New Jersey, it's not going to grow well. And if it doesn't grow well, it's not going to make good wine. Right. And so really the idea is to find the right variety for your soil and your climate and that, all of the factors that come into making great wine. And so what we did before we planted anything was look at about 100 years worth of soil and climate data for our specific site. Wow. Compare that to Europe, because like I said, the Europeans have been doing this for 2,000 years. They had done the trial and error to figure out what varieties worked where. Right. And what we found is that we're very similar to the sort of northern Italian, French, and Austrian wine regions. So we basically said, let's start with what they grow there, and we'll see what sticks. And that's been really successful for us. We have some more known varieties like Riesling and Pinot Noir, and also some funky ones like Gewürztraminer and an Austrian grape called Blaufränkisch. And so the vines, because they're well adapted to this climate, have responded beautifully, have very high quality fruit, and that's making better wine. And we find that the consumer these days kind of cares less about it saying Cabernet or Chardonnay. Right. It just wants something that tastes good. So wow. And so Riesling, you have Riesling? Yeah, we do. Riesling's our main white variety we grow here, and we do that across a couple of variety styles. Very dry, off dry, and then make a dessert wine from it as well. See, I like, Riesling is by far my favorite, but I love the science. Have you ever done a commercial for New Jersey, vineyards? I mean, you really have put the science. Obviously, you have an Ivy League education, and you're putting it. I mean, that's the best case I've ever heard for why New Jersey is one of the best places in the country to have wine. Not just another one, but one of the best. So that's very well said. Have you ever done a commercial for vineyards in New Jersey? I thought I'm doing one right now. That's what we're going to make this, and hopefully the industry will take this. And so, on that note, we're dealing with this pandemic, and we were opening up, and then we closed down a little bit because other states are closing down and other things. How are you doing, and how have you dealt with this pandemic as a vineyard and a restaurant? Yeah, I mean, it's been a whirlwind. We don't operate a restaurant here, so the only food we serve is local cheese and charcuterie from local farms in the area. So certainly less of our business is indoors, but almost all of our business is on premise. Right. So we sell everything direct to consumer. We don't sell to liquor stores. We don't sell to restaurants. We're a small farm, and so for us to be able to make the margins that we need to make this a economically viable business, we need to sell direct to consumer. We have to cut out the middleman. Right. And so when we designed this business, we really made it a destination farm, a place where you can come out with your family, with your kids, with your dogs, come out, do a tasting, grab a glass of wine, take a couple bottles home. And so that's how we still sell 99% of our wine. Obviously, that becomes an issue when people are under lockdown and can no longer go out. In reality, we were deemed an essential business, as all businesses were during the lockdowns. And so we were still open for takeaway bottle sales. So somebody could come into the winery, obviously wearing a mask, purchase a bottle of wine, seal a bottle of wine, and take it home to go. Well, that's just not the way most of our customers are used to purchasing our wine. They're used to, like I said, spending some time here, doing a tasting, seeing what our new releases are, and then taking wine home to go. So we had to sort of revamp our whole business plan during this pandemic. The first thing we had to do was lay off 40 people, all of our part-time staff that works in the tasting room, because we literally just didn't have a tasting room anymore. Right. Luckily, most of them do this as a second job, like a weekend job. They're either students, or they have a full-time thing, and they do this for supplemental income. So thankfully, they weren't so burdened financially. Right. we kept our full-time staff on, which is me and 6 people that work in the vineyard year-round, and then also our tasting room manager. And so our tasting room manager was handling takeaway bottle sales, online sales, which thankfully we literally have the best customers in the world because we increased our online sales 50-fold.
Wow.
Pre-pandemic. So it's just like people who really wanted to support us, and that was the way that they found that they could. So we offered free shipping. We were doing local deliveries on our way home from work. Well, all of my staff had their own little carve out on a map of where they were doing local deliveries. So that certainly helped kind of keep the lights on. We also got a PPP loan, so that helped me to be able to keep my full-time staff on.
Wonderful.
Because the vines, they keep growing. They don't care about a global pandemic. It's business as usual for them. And so we had to have people out there tending to them, as we always do. And then, it was basically just trying to figure out how do we cut our expenses down to an absolute bare minimum? How do we reach our customers and tell them, yes, we're open for takeaway. Yes, we're open for online sales. And so I think we certainly learned a lot during that period and really tweaked our business model, even going beyond this pandemic, whenever it is over.
Right.
But ultimately, I think it's going to make us a stronger business, more versatile, diversifying our revenue streams. All those things are positives that came from this.
Well, wonderful. And again, that just shows the kind of entrepreneur that you are. And we'll do this a couple times. What's the website? If somebody who's listening wants to buy wine online, what's the website?
It's just BeneduceVineyards.com. So that's Bene, which means good in Italian, B-E-N-E, and Duce, which means leader. So our name in Italian means good leader, and so that's why we named the winery that.
Perfect. Great. We're going to take a couple minute breaks for commercial, and then we'll come back with Mike Beneduce to learn some more about wine. This has been fantastic, Mike.
Thanks.
There you go, Richard. Oh, is that too hard for you?
No. Is it too hard for you?
Woo, we're playing catch now. Oh, shit.
What do I want to be when I grow up? Maybe a musician? A veterinarian? Maybe an equestrian? A mommy? Well, why not be all these things and more? Consider joining me, Dr. V, with friends and colleagues as we explore a wide range of topics together. V is for variety, here on RVN TV.
Number 7. Number 8.
9 regular. Oh, wait. 13 giant. The usual?
Of course. Number 1.
Jersey Mike's, a sub above.
Hello again, I'm Dr. Dale Caldwell, your host for Family Business World with Mike Beneduce from Beneduce Vineyards. This has been a wonderful education for me, and I am more enthusiastic about New Jersey wines than ever before. I'm always, pro-Jersey stuff. And so, Mike, let's let the audience see some pictures. And so the studio will bring up some pictures here first with a beautiful sunset and a tree. What's that all about?
Oh, so that's just a shot in our vineyards. You can see the vines kind of flanking the frame there.
It's beautiful.
The center of that photo is what we call our Nanny Tree. So we named that tree after our deceased grandmother. Kind of the matriarch kind of looks over the farm for us.
I love it.
And that's a 100-year-old black oak tree. So it's the oldest thing on our farm. So we feel like it's kind of the spiritual center for us.
Well, you have a family tree. So which
literal family tree.
Which is one of well, it's funny for those that and again this certainly through our MP4 people around the world will see this. A friend of mine is in New York and I was driving around New Jersey and they were like, this is such a green state. I mean, we are the Garden State, and people would look at that and say that's not New Jersey. But that is New Jersey, and that's why New Jersey is such a great place for vineyards and gardening, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see the next.
Yeah, people don't realize that the majority of acreage in New Jersey is dedicated to farming. I think it's most people's experience of New Jersey is, right outside of New York, or in the urban or suburban areas, or right outside of Philadelphia. It's the same thing, but really the entire rest of the state is the garden state. We feed New York, we feed Philadelphia, and wineries are no exception to that. We have almost 60 operating wineries in New Jersey. And, the growth has really been exponential over the last decade because people are starting to, like I said before, figure out what varieties work in what regions. And certainly New Jersey has some nice diversity of soils and climate. So there's all different styles and just sort of figuring out, what our niche is going to be in the larger wine world.
Well, that's one time I think New Jersey was the most densely populated state, but had the highest per capita farmland at the same time, which is it's quite a contrast. So this is describe this. These are some of the vineyards. Wow, it's really big.
Yeah, so that's just a view from the top of our hill. Our farm is 50 acres, and we currently have 22 acres planted to grapes. So grapes are a really high-touch crop. We're out in the fields year-round, literally 11 out of 12 months of the year. We're out there pruning, tying, edging, leaf pulling, harvesting, all that stuff. And so we have, like I said, 22 acres planted to grapes right now, which allows us to produce between 4,000 and 5,000 cases of wine each year. And we're almost 100% estate grown, meaning we grow almost all of our own grapes.
Right.
Next year we will be 100%.
Wow.
And that's small in terms of scale. I think 4,000 to 5,000 cases sounds like a lot, but the average winery, is well beyond that. We're considered a small boutique winery, which is why we still have to sell everything direct to consumer.
Right.
But we really are designed that way. We want to keep it small. We want to allow people to have the experience of visiting the farm and seeing where the grapes are grown, how they're grown, where it was made. And I think we're really part of this sort of slow food movement and this back to the earth movement, where people are starting to pay attention to the food that they eat and how it was grown and where it was grown and by who. And so people go to a farmer's market and pick out a pepper, and they want to know, Farmer Jim, what did you spray on this pepper, and how's the season, and how are you guys doing this year? And then they go to a local wine shop and pull a bottle of Malbec from Argentina off the shelf that was grown 3,000 miles away. They know nothing about it. And so, one of my missions is really to educate people that wine is liquid food. It is an agricultural product that somebody farms, somebody makes it with their hands, hopefully, if you're drinking good wine. And so we should care as much about where wine is from and how it was made as we do our food.
Well, and so just philosophically, before we talk about the next picture, I'm a big believer, and I think a lot of the unrest and the protest around something I call people up versus top down is that what people are just kind of sick and tired of the big businesses dictating, the big politics dictating. And instead of going back to, not bottom up, and I really don't like the term bottom up because it makes it sound like the people are worse than the top, but it's people up. And I'm really after this people up movement, which includes exactly that. The people up, go to your local vineyard and why go to the largest one in the world? Yeah, I mean, you save a few cents, but you actually lose money in the long run because you're giving more back to the community than they are, and you're bringing taxes in, and people don't really think about that.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, I think grassroots is a perfect way to describe it because it has that sort of organic, natural vibe to it that really most people are starting to adhere to. And I think, honestly, the younger generation is leading that movement. I saw, like, my grandparents' generation, everyone had a garden in their backyard. They grew their own vegetables. They traded with their neighbors. They made their own wine. My parents' generation got out of that, I think, because of just work and how the economy was evolving. And I think that most people, but I think led by the younger generation, are starting to kind of go back toward that. And just care about authenticity. And like you said, they don't want to support these huge corporations that don't treat their employees well and don't pay taxes somehow. They have enough accountants where they get through the loopholes. And they want to put money into their local economies. And certainly when they support a business like us, it stays with our local economy because we employ all local people, and we live here, our kids go to schools here, and we spend here, and so it's I think it's, like you said, it's a grassroots movement.
Well, and the other thing, Mike, is that people don't realize, which is why I love this show, is that family businesses treat their employees much better than any other business, including government and others, having worked in big business, government, and others. And because you can't afford to mistreat employees and have turnover, you treat them like family. And that's what I love about family businesses, but people don't seem to understand that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the strength of any family business, is the people that work there, and the fact that they are invested in the business as much as, someone like me that owns it. They, just the amount of pride that they put into their work here, and the amount of hospitality that our tasting room staff brings to, the guests that arrive on our farm. It's just a totally different vibe than going to Walmart or wherever, where people are treated like a number and a SKU tag, and it's really a community feel. And really, one of the things about the pandemic that has been nice is it's brought us even closer as a group of coworkers, because we were literally the 7 of us that were here. We weren't seeing anyone else besides ourselves and our family a lot for like 3 months. Right. And so, there's a social element too. We have a glass of wine after work, and we talk about our day and what we think about this whole craziness. And it's nice to feel connected to your coworkers on a whole different level than I think most people get into when they're in office environment or at a big company.
And I was talking too much, that we had a picture of, that's where you are now. Yeah, so this is, describe this.
Oh yeah, so this is our new addition to our building. Are you talking about the wood frame structure?
Yeah, the wood frame, yeah.
So that's our crush pad. So that's where I am right now. It's an open air crush pad. So it's where we do all of our grape processing during the harvest season. So grapes are only harvested once a year, September, October. We pick all the grapes during that time. And during those 2 months, we're really busy processing the grapes, pressing, crushing, cleaning barrels, all that stuff.
Do you do it barefoot like they did in the old Lucy show? Did you know?
We don't do that anymore. It's all stainless steel. You don't want my feet in your wine, I don't think. So. But basically, this is where we do our grape processing, and then for the remainder of the year, we use it as outdoor seating. As you can see, we're socially distanced tables, and so it's nice if it's covered, if it's rains, and we can fit about 50 people out here with social distancing.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And then we also have plenty of seats outside on our big patio and lawn area, where that's one of the advantages of a farm, is that almost everything happens outdoors. And so we've been lucky enough to have some of our customers start to come back now because we are enabling outdoor seating, and it's been great to have some revenue coming in.
Do you rent it out for events? If somebody wanted to have a special event or something, do you do that?
We normally do. We're not doing events right now, just because
in normal times,
COVID and everything. But we do live music still on the weekends.
Okay.
And so people have to arrive. They're in a face mask. We show them to their table, which is spaced normally 20 feet apart from another picnic table. And then once they're seated, they can remove their face mask. And we're doing wine by the bottle right now, so they can bring their own food, or we have a food truck, and it's just kind of a nice picnic environment, a nice way to get outside and start to reacclimate yourself into society, I think. So people have really enjoyed it so far.
Have you thought about a more formal restaurant? I mean, you have food there, but have you thought about that, or is that more of a hassle, or what's your thinking there?
I've thought about it. I love food. I'm a food and wine guy, and so part of my soul just really wants to do that. Right. But I also know a lot of restaurant owners, and that's a tough business to be in good times. And right now, they're all struggling. And nobody wants to talk about this, but I think you're going to see a lot of restaurants fail after this, or at least change hands, because these owners are on such slim margins in a normal year, and then something like this happens, and now they're operating on credit, and it's a really difficult situation. So what we do, our philosophy is that you're welcome to bring your own food anytime. That way, if people have dietary restrictions, or they want to bring their own type of food, they can, and then we help you match one of our wines to whatever food you brought. So it's kind of like a bring your own food as versus to bring your own wine. And so,
Oh, I love that. I love that. I have the honor of sitting on the Governor's Restart and Recovery Commission, and I'm on there with the woman in charge of the kind of restaurant association. And in the paper today, she was talking about, originally they were estimating about 10% of the restaurants are going to go out of business, but now they're talking about 23% or so of the business of the restaurants. The challenge was that they were supposed to open July 2nd. And people bought stuff, and then all of a sudden the requirements changed and they closed, and that was a real hardship. Though I hear some legislation is going to give them some reimbursement for what they invested, but and part of the reason I do this show is that so many leaders, and I used to be a state official, don't understand that we're in a small business economy. The United States is a small business country, and so as small businesses go, so does employment, so does the economy. And the number one job of every politician is to create jobs so that people can feed their families. And the best way to do that is to support small businesses.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as farmers, we're just used to dealing with a higher percent of like the unknown than normal business owners. Like so much of my success and failure depends on the weather, which I have zero control over. Right. So we're sort of used to that a little bit. Excuse me, 1 second. Delivery truck pulling in.
There you go. That's
and so we're used to sort of dealing with some of the unknown, but it's from a business owner's perspective, it's been extremely difficult to budget and plan and adapt, because it just seemed like, especially in the beginning of this thing, every week we had a different set of restrictions, or something was being changed, or there was so many gray areas, or are we included in this? Are we not included in this? And so we became, I think, even more adaptable than we're used to being as farmers and business people. But certainly, every industry is being affected by this in a different way. And, our revenue was down 90% the first month. So it's like, how do you exist as a business when that happens? Yeah. But you adapt. And, luckily there was some government help that came, and hopefully for places like restaurants, there's more, because those are such important parts of our, the fabric of our communities, places where people to go and meet and enjoy each other's company, that to see 25% of them close would be heartbreaking, I think, just from a personal aspect, but also devastating to our economy.
Really devastating. And what people don't realize is with family businesses, the family's working in the business. So when the business is not working, the whole family's unemployed. It's not like somebody's working in government and so on. And well, we're almost at the end of time, and you mentioned the one issue with weather. We have climate change and other things. How do you manage around the weather? What's the perfect weather for the vineyard? For what is kind of the perfect year? What kind of weather do you hope for?
Perfect weather for vines is the same weather that we love, right? Like 75, sunny, maybe a little breeze is perfect. The most important thing is that we have a dry harvest season. So if you get a lot of rain as the grapes are ripe and almost ready to pick, that water sort of travels up through the plant and swells up the grapes with water. And that can sort of dilute all the flavors and sugars that we've worked so hard to concentrate through the way we grow them throughout the year. So a dry fall, dry harvest season is super important. And, the rest of the year, we just have to sort of work with nature. And, if it's a little bit rainy this week, hopefully it's a little bit dry the next week. Right. And like I said, you learn to sort of let go of things you can't control as a farmer, because otherwise you drive yourself crazy.
Excellent. Well, what's the website again, if people want to buy from you?
BeneduceVineyards.com, and you can Google us. We're on Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff.
Mike, are you open on Saturday?
Yeah, we're open.
I may bring I may come in. Now, they can't drink, but I have a 15-year-old daughter. Can I bring her as long as she doesn't drink?
Yeah, absolutely. Kids are welcome every time, except from Saturday night for our live music from 5 to 9 o'clock. We do adults only. That way, you get a babysitter, leave the kids at home, and come out and have a nice date night with your wife, or come out with some friends and hang out.
Well, good. I'm a single guy yet, but hey, Mike, this is hey, man, this is fantastic. Good luck. I'm looking forward to visiting, and please support your family businesses like Beneduce Vineyards. This is Dale Caldwell, thanking you for watching Family Business World. We'll see you next week.